Hi everyone, and welcome to a Craftin Desert Divas new release highlight, this time featuring the Ferris Wheel dies. When you first receive your die set, it's going to come like this, and it's going to be connected with these small metal tabs. Now you can use this die set as is, you don't need to separate it, but I always like to separate my dies so I don't waste as much cardstock. In order to do that, you can either simply clip those little metal tabs with wire cutters, or bend the dies back and forth until they come apart from each other. Either way works just as well as the other, and those wire cutters you can find at your local hardware store, if not online. So this is a 5-piece die set. Now with this die set, you get the base, which does have stitching around the base of that little triangle. You get the actual wheel itself, which again has the Craftin Desert Divas stitching, and that stitching does match all of the other dies in the Craftin Desert Divas shop. You get the center of the wheel, you get the little bucket. Now this doesn't have any stitching on it, but that's because you have this little overlay as well that has the little star accent and the stitching on the top. Here's a closer still photo of all the dies that are included in this set, and you're going to need every single one to make up this Ferris wheel. So in order to cut with these dies, you just need a die cutting machine that accepts wafer thin dies. I'm using my Big Kick with tabs 1 and 2 down on my multi-purpose platform, a cutting plate. Then I'll go ahead and put my cardstock down. I'll go ahead and put the die on top of the cardstock with the cutting edges facing the cardstock, and then go ahead and put one more cutting plate right on top, and I can run this through my die cutting machine using the crank. Now, like I said before, these are wafer thin dies, so any die cutting machine that accepts wafer thin dies, you can use that with. Just make sure you follow your machine's instructions for these types of dies. So once this comes out, you can see you get very nice clean cuts, and you also get great stitching detail around all of these dies as well. Now, if you have trouble popping out these little pieces, the little holes in the center, I just like to take a little pin. This is actually to get the SIM card out of your smartphone that I use here. It's got a nice large handle, and then I just poke through and all of those little holes will fall right out. Here's a closer look at all of the die cuts and their stitching detail from cardstock. Now in today's video, I'm going to show you 2 different ways to put together this Ferris wheel. The first is going to be the way that you get the interactive Ferris wheel. Now for this, you are going to need a base die cut, the center, the wheel. You're going to need 6 of the buckets, and then of course 6 of the overlays as well. You're also going to need 6 brads to fit the buckets, and then you're going to also need 1 larger brad to fit in the center of the Ferris wheel as well. So 7 brads altogether. Now to start with, I'm going to start with the buckets, and I'm using my Quick Sticks tool and just a liquid glue to put on these overlays. Now that Quick Sticks tool is not necessary, it just helps me pick up pieces without getting glue everywhere. Now, right now I'm using Multimedia Matte. This is a matte finish, so it's not going to be shiny if I get any goop outside of the areas under the cardstock. And then I'll just overlay that little piece right on top, making sure not to cover up that hole. You want to line up the top of the edges and make sure that the star is right over and centered over that hole, because you are going to need access to that to put together the interactive portion. Now, I found that the tip on my Multimedia Matte was just a little bit thick for these fine of detail dies, so I actually switched to Atomic Studios glue that is in the Craftin Desert Divas shop, and it's got a very fine nozzle on it, and you don't need to buy anything extra. It sticks very well, and I didn't find that it had a shiny surface whenever it dried like the Glossy Accents does. So that's what I switched to, and you'll see that in just a moment. It also comes in a larger bottle, so you get a little bit more product in there. Now I am just squirting a very thin line right up against the edge of those buckets. Then I do just a little bit around the hole just to secure the bottom of the overlay, and then I just place that right on top. Now you can put an acrylic black over these once you get it all glued down, just to put a little pressure on there and hold everything in place, which I will do once I get all of them done. Now you can use whatever colors of cardstock you want to build up your Ferris wheel. That's kind of the fun of this project. You get to customize it to the recipient, the occasion of the card, or your own personal style. Now I'm using very primary colors, so I did cut my wheel from red. I kept more of the metal parts of the Ferris wheel a gray color, so the bucket, the center, and the base of the Ferris wheel. And then for the overlays, I used some very bright primary colors in yellow, blue, and orange. And I did that because it will match the brads that I'm using later on in this video. So once I had all of these nice and lined up and overlaid and all of my glue cleaned up, I went ahead and put an acrylic block on top of this just to put a little pressure on those, make sure everything held nicely and dried right in place. Now once I had all of those done, it was time to move on to actually putting this together. So in order to do that, what you need to do is line up one of the buckets with this hole on the outside of the wheel, and then stick a brad, making sure that you go through both the hole in the bucket and also the hole in the wheel as well. Now I used these square brads. They're just generic store brand, craft store brand brads that I picked up at my local craft store, and I just stick that through the hole and then open up the back of the brad. Now whenever you tighten this, you don't want to tighten it too much. If you do and you press too hard, your little bucket won't spin on your wheel. Now if you want that look, that's fine. Go ahead and press down all you want, but if you want this to be more interactive and you want the buckets to move a little bit, tighten it very gently, and then you'll have a nice spinning bucket on there. So I just coordinated the colors in my brads with the colors that I used on the overlay of the bucket. You don't have to do this. You can use silver, gold, whatever kind of brad you want or you have on hand. So I finished up doing all of those all the way around, and I'm checking as I go to make sure that these do spin and I didn't tighten up too much. Then I'm going to go ahead and line up that wheel right over the base, and then the little silver circle or gray circle right on top. Line up those 3 holes and then put a larger brad right through the center of that and tighten the back. Again, I'm not going to tighten too much because I do want this to move and spin. Now once I have that on there, you can see my little wheel spins very nicely, and also my little buckets. Now at this time, if you have some that don't want to move with you, go ahead and flip it over, loosen up your brads a little bit, and then it should spin freely. And there you have a nice little interactive Ferris wheel die cut ready to be put on your card and filled up with little critters. Now a lot of the Craftin Desert Divas critters stamps do fit in these little buckets. The little Monster Carnival stamp set that's new this month also fits in these buckets too. And if you don't want to fussy cut them out, the SVG file die cut files are in the Craftin Desert Divas shop for 99 cents a piece, as they are with all of the stamp sets. And there's one final close-up of that Ferris wheel all put together. And also, here's a little written picture tutorial if that helps you out to put this Ferris wheel together. Now, if you want to put this Ferris wheel together, you might not have brads, or you just want it to be stationary on your card, I'm going to show you how you can put together this Ferris wheel where it's non-interactive. To do that, you are going to need to save your little star die cuts, and I just wanted to throw in there too that those are great for a shaker card. If you want to build them up, throw them in a shaker card sometime. Don't throw those away. They're very cute and a lot of things you can do with those. Now I went ahead, die cut everything as I had before, so the wheel, the center portion, the base, 6 of the buckets, 6 of the overlays, and I did keep those little stars. Now I'm going to do this just like I did the other one to start out with. I'm using my glue, putting a thin line right at the top, a little bit around that center hole, and then I'll just put those overlays right on top of each one of those buckets. I'm using the same colors here just to show you 2 different versions in the end, but of course you can customize these colors to your liking and your card style. And of course, once I had all of those overlays on top, I did put an acrylic block right on top just to hold them in place so they could dry properly. Now, once I have all of those done, I'm going to start putting together the Ferris wheel. A little bit of glue around the back of the little hole in the center of the wheel, and I'm going to place that right over the top of the base because I want that wheel in front of the base. Now I'm going to go ahead and put on that center circle right over the top of my red circle just by putting a little bit of glue right around the back of that Then I'll place it, making sure to line up those holes. And I'm going to cover that hole, so don't worry about it. I'm throwing an acrylic block on top just to hold everything in place so it dries nicely. Then on the buckets, I'm applying a little bit of glue on the outside of the circle on the wheel. Then I'll go ahead and place the bucket over, making sure that it's lined up so when I insert little critters into this, I'm not going to have one hanging off the side or upside down. So I want to make sure these are nice and straight as it would be on a Ferris wheel as it's going around. As I'm doing that, I'm just popping that acrylic block right on top. So again, these can dry right in place and they're not going to shift on me if I bump it with my hand. So I'm just going around and again making sure that I line these up with those holes because I am going to go ahead and cover those up in just a moment. Now with this particular design, you do want to use your glue pretty sparingly because these are smaller pieces and it is just a small area to glue, so you don't want to overdo it. So just use your glue sparingly so you don't have a bunch oozing out and everything will end up fitting together properly. So my last little one is my blue bucket that I put together first. So I'll go ahead and put one more drop of glue right around that last little hole and then drop on that bucket, making sure that it's lined up properly. Now comes the stars. So in those buckets, you have that hole right in the center where your brad would go when you make this interactive. However, I don't want that showing because I want this to be stationary. So I'm just going to pick up one of those little stars that came out of the die cut and just pop it right back into place to cover up that hole. Now I'm doing a different color here. If you wanted this to look like one cohesive piece, you could throw back in the star of the same color and then you won't notice that it's even a star die cut in there. And I am gluing all of mine flat with just glue straight on the back. If you wanted to make these a little bit more dimensional and add some dimension to your Ferris wheel, you can always pop a little bit of fun foam and double-sided adhesive or just your fun foam tape right underneath those stars or the Ferris wheel or the center portion to make this a little bit more dimensional and just a little bit more fun too. So once I had all of the stars in place, I needed to cover up that center hole in the center of the Ferris wheel. So what I decided to do was take one of those little sequins from the brand new sequin mix and pop that right in the center for a little bit of added shine and just a look of a brad, but without the interactive effect. And that finished off the non-interactive version of this Ferris wheel. There's a closer look at that all put together. Now I'm not sure if it shows in the video, but this is a very good sized die cut. Here's a look at all the different pieces and their measurements, especially the bucket, so you can see which one of your favorite little critters will fit inside of there. Also, the finished Ferris wheel, the assembled Ferris wheel, is approximately 4¼ inches tall by 4¼ inches wide, and that's approximate. It's going to adjust with how you put it together and which way you do it. If it's interactive, if it's stationary, and which way your buckets are going. So I wanted to also give you a look at this die cut compared to an A2 size panel. So these are two white A2 size panels here, and there's the die cut overlaid on both of those. So this is a very good size die cut. The design team has been very busy with this new die set. Here are a few of their cards to help get you inspired. These dies will be available in the Craftin Desert Divas online shop on June 23rd at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That link will be in the description box below, but please know it will not work until June 23rd. Thanks for watching!